Now, I know that Game Week 12 isn't even over yet, but that doesn't stop me making some FPL content for you guys. So here are players to buy and avoid for Game Week 13. First up then, I wanted to look at a model from 11FI. I'll leave a link to 11FI in the description. They do great projection models for both clean sheets and projected goals. We'll take a look at projected goals later in the video, but I wanted to focus on clean sheets first. And what we've got here is teams ranked by total percentage chance of keeping clean sheets over the next 5 game weeks. So from game week 13 to 17. And you can see one team there at the top that is just the absolute standout. And that's Arsenal. In each of their next 5 fixtures, they have 40% or greater likelihood to keep a clean sheet, which I would suggest are pretty good clean sheet odds. And I would also suggest that the Arsenal defence are definitely worth considering in FPL. I'm quite pleased actually, because in previous videos that I made for Game Week 12, I absolutely banged on about the Arsenal defence. I think I spoke about them in 3 or 4 of the videos that I made ahead of Game Week 12. I'm pretty pleased to say that they kept a clean sheet in 12 against Nottingham Forest. And I look at the fixtures they've got coming up, and it wasn't just the Forest game I was focused on. I'm focused on the future fixtures as well. West Ham in 13. The only reasonably tough one there is potentially Man United, but yet to see how they play under Amorim at the moment. And then they've got Fulham, Everton, Crystal Palace and Ipswich after that. I think those are great fixtures. You know, the model suggests they're going to get clean sheet odds, but in my mind, I think they're going to get clean sheets too. You know, there's a difference between reading a model and then applying that for yourself. Yeah. Another thing with Arsenal defence as well is over the last 2 seasons, it's not just, well, I say that it's not just a small sample size this season. They've not actually been all that great defensively this season, no, but it has been a small sample size of 12 games so far. And I would want to focus a bit wider on the last 2 seasons that Arsenal have been by far and away the best defence in the league. They've kept the most clean sheets. They've conceded the fewest goals. Oh, sorry, well, that's sort of similar, but keeping clean sheets and conceding fewest goals isn't necessarily the same thing. And then they've also had the lowest expected goals conceded as well over the last 2 seasons. It's all that combined makes me think the Arsenal defence are strong. Keeping that clean sheet against Forest, the fixtures they've got coming up next, I think any of those Arsenal defenders are worth buying. For me, the 4 you can see on screen are probably the ones to go for in Timber, Raya, Saliba and Gabriel. With the busy Christmas period we've got coming up, I'm not sure, other than Raya, you can tell me that any of them are absolutely nailed on to play all the games. I would obviously say Saliba and Gabriel are probably slightly more nailed than Timber, but even then I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of rotation even amongst the centre-backs. Obviously they've got Champions League football mixed in as well. So yeah, I'd probably say David Raya is going to be the most nailed, right? He's going to play every game. And then Saliba and Gabriel, probably the 2 most nailed outfield defenders, if that makes sense. Gabriel's probably slightly better than Saliba for goal threat. And then Timber, you kind of get what you pay for, really. He's cheaper than Gabriel and Saliba, but his expected minutes, well, yeah, his minutes are probably going to be lower than the other 2. I wanted to look next at a useful piece of data basically we got from Rob T FPL. He's actually on Blue Sky rather than Twitter now. I think he's made the switch, so I will leave a link to his Blue Sky account in the description. What Rob T FPL does is he uses data from betting markets, gambling companies, and applies them or makes them useful for us FPL players. And the reason I like looking at this data, I bang on about this all the time, but gambling companies spend millions and millions on maths, projections and algorithms in order to predict outcomes, to set the odds, to try and make money on bets. So why not use that millions and millions of pounds of projections in FPL? So what we've got here is a view from the bookmakers of projected goal involvements for the rest of the season. You can see at the bottom, there are some key players that are actually missing from this metric, mainly Saka, Gordon. Well, you can see them there. I'm not going to read through them. But it's interesting viewing just to see some players that are ranking higher than you might expect them to. So Haaland, Salah, Palmer, Son, top 4. I'd imagine if he did have data, Saka would be up there as well. And then Kai Havertz is actually 5th on this list. Bruno Fernandes is 6th. They're ahead of Foden and Isak, apparently. Solanke on there, still predicted to do well. João Pedro, I've noticed, yeah, obviously he's back fit, playing really well for Brighton, did really well in Game Week 12. He's ahead of quite a few other premium players and cheap players in the game. So he's actually probably, just looking at this list, yeah, probably the top cheap player in terms of projected remaining goal involvements. And yeah, I'm not gonna go through all these players. That was probably the most interesting observation I could make. But you can obviously pause the video and check it out yourself. You know, looking at this data, if you're deciding on maybe 2 players that you could potentially transfer in and trying to whittle out down to 1, maybe this sort of data could help you. I literally just spoke about this guy being where he was ranked in the top projected goal scorers for the rest of the season. That's a lot to say, isn't it? I think Isak is a really good option. He hasn't yet played in game week 12. So anything could happen, right? But I think regardless, I cannot not say that he's a good option. Last season, he put up better underlying data and better numbers than Ollie Watkins did from less games, if that makes sense. And he's on penalties. I think the Newcastle fixtures, bar that Liverpool one in game week 14, are really good coming up. And his record this season has not been too bad at all. And I would suggest that some people might say he's actually had a disappointing start to the season. And he's still got 6 attacking returns from 9 appearances so far. He's on penalties for Newcastle. Newcastle missing maybe Anthony Gordon this week. Well, at least in game week 12. But I'd imagine he's probably back for game week 13. And just in general, I don't think Newcastle are particularly a team that are struggling to score goals. And personally, even if they're they're not really in a tough spot at the moment. I think that's harsh to say, but you know, even if they're in a tough part of the season, I would back Eddie Howe to drag them out of it, particularly in their home games. I just think there are a couple of teams in the Premier League, Newcastle being one of them, that are just exceptional at home. I would back Newcastle to beat anyone at St James's Park on their day. So even that Liverpool fixture there in game week 14, I would not be surprised at all to see Isak performing and scoring in that game. So, you know, you might be put off by that fixture in 14 about bringing him in, but I wouldn't be. I think Newcastle could do well in that one. And Isak he's a great player, a great option in FPL on penalties for Newcastle, good price point. Yeah, I think he's a really good option. So that's Isak, but there's another striker around the same price who has good fixtures coming up, who has put up good numbers this season, and is actually slightly cheaper than Isak, and that's Nicholas Jackson. He's definitely sorted out the problems that he had last season. He was getting in the right places, being a real danger man, but just not finishing his chances. And he's really fixed that this season. You can see there, from 12 appearances so far, he scored 7 goals from 6.12 XG. So last season, he was one of the biggest underperformers of his XG. But this season, he's actually overperforming it. And he's also got 4 assists alongside it. So that's 11 attacking returns from 12 starts, which is actually better than what Isak's done. You can see there, 6 attacking returns from 9 starts. I would, however, in my opinion, say I believe that Isak is better than Nicholas Jackson. If I were to be completely honest with you and give my opinion, I think Isak's better. I think the fact he takes penalties just gives him the edge. And the record that he put up last season, he's just got a bigger track record, in my mind, in my opinion, of attacking returns in the Premier League than Nicholas Jackson does. But I cannot possibly tell you that still doesn't mean that Nicholas Jackson is a good option. You know, the level of returns he's put up is good. Chelsea have not been lighting the world up this season, but what they haven't done is struggle to score goals. Enzo Maresca has got that team putting the ball in the back of the net in pretty much every game they play. And obviously Nicholas Jackson is heavily involved in that. So yeah, I think alongside Isak, Nicholas Jackson is a really good option as well. Anyone in here a Chris Wood owner like me as well? Very disappointed that he didn't even start against Arsenal. I'm hoping that that's just a one-off. You know, he's from New Zealand, so he's played international duty in Oceania. So he's had a really long travel to get back to England for Premier League football. So I'm hoping that the reason Awoniyi played is literally because Chris Wood was too tired and too fatigued from his trip. I say that because he's got Ipswich in game week 13, and I think that's a great fixture. As a Chris Wood owner, I'm going to struggle to sell him for that one. But what I would say about Chris Wood, once that Ipswich fixture, I guess, is out of the way, I'm not convinced he's the best cheap forward in the game anymore. What we've got here is the top expected points for cheap forwards for the next 5 game weeks. I've ranked them basically under 7 million, ranked them for expected points over the next 5 game weeks. This is according to Fantasy Football Hub. Top is Chris Wood, right? And you can obviously see why he's put up great numbers so far this season. Unlucky. Owners should be able to consider themselves, at least I think as an owner, unlucky that he didn't play against Arsenal. But I think you can do better than Chris Wood. Other than game week 13 when he's got Ipswich, I think there's a case to have other cheap strikers in your team now. Reason being is I don't think Nottingham Forest are actually that creative of a team. I don't think they actually create all that many chances for Chris Wood. And Chris Wood he's been amazing this season. His finishing has been so good. And he's done so from pretty, not poor chances, but he's not getting many chances created for him. The reason he's scored so many goals is because he's been so good at finishing. And I think other teams also have better fixtures. I look at Cunha, right? The guy looks absolutely unbelievable at the moment. I'd be hard-pressed not to sell Wood for Cunha in Game Week 13, even though Wood's got Ipswich. I'll probably avoid it, but I can't deny that Cunha's looking like a good option. Wissa got an early sub. A little bit worrying for him. He's not necessarily a 90-minute nailed-on man. Raul Jimenez, I think he had a pretty close chance of scoring in Game Week 12. Unfortunately, he didn't return, though. But the player I'm really liking at this price point is João Pedro. You know, the couple of games that he's played back for Brighton, he's been absolutely immense. And the fixtures for Brighton look really good coming up. He's on penalties. I think with the form that he's in, I was previously a little bit worried about his minutes. But I think given the 2 performances he's put in now since returning to that Brighton team, I think his place in that team is like unquestionable now. I think he's going to play. So yeah, I just want to do a bit of talk about the cheap forwards basically, because I think after Game Week 13, Chris Wood is sellable. I really like Cunha. I think he's looking really good. And I really like João Pedro as well. And finally, I just wanted to take a look at the projected goals data because I think there's more discussion to be had around what's happened so far in Game Week 12. And I'm going to use this slide basically to drive some of that. Man City, right? How disappointing have they been in recent game weeks? For me, there's obviously, well, there's multiple players that people probably have in their team from Man City. Haven't spoken about them yet in this video. Probably, at least, I think most people watching this video own at least one Man City defender. We'll just go back to the clean sheet odds, actually, a second. The clean sheet odds for Man City are, well, I think they're slightly inflated, basically, because I'm not convinced by Man City defensively at all. So for me, I think I'd be looking to sell Man City defenders ahead of Game Week 13, where, of course, they play Liverpool. And then attackers, I don't think there's a Man City attacker other than Haaland that I'd feel comfortable having in my team right now. I genuinely don't. Even Haaland, right? There is obviously a case. I've still got him in my team. But there is definitely a case to get rid of Erling Haaland, right? Especially if you don't want to captain him. For me, I look at my team and I love it, even with Haaland in it. I still think I've got a good team, so I don't feel the need to sell him. But, you know, there is genuinely a case that you could do that. Arsenal's fixtures coming up are really good. I think Saka, you can pretty much guarantee Saka is going to be the best Arsenal asset come the end of the season. Odegaard's pretty good as well. Was disappointed to see Havertz get a benching in Game Week 12. I was really surprised by that. I haven't seen Liverpool play yet, but you can't deny Mo Salah as an option. Chelsea has spoken about Jackson. Newcastle has spoken about Isak. Spurs. I was big on people selling Spurs ahead of the Man City game, but you actually look at their fixtures they've got coming up. They're not too bad. Like, I would not be too concerned about keeping hold of my Spurs attackers going forward. And then, yeah, Brighton with João Pedro, I think, could be good. Brentford, their fixtures peter off a little bit from sort of Game Week 15 onwards. I think there is a potential case to sell in Mbumo from that point. Man United, I'll always say this about Man United until Amarim's had a few games, really. In terms of the attackers from Man United and possibly defenders as well, other than Bruno Fernandes, I'm not sure there is an outfield player that you can guarantee is going to play every game for them right now. I think Amarim needs some time to find his best 11 and work things out. And I would expect a little bit of rotation until then. So for me, other than Bruno Fernandes, I don't think I would touch a Man United player. Now, just go down to the bottom here. I spoke about Chris Wood potentially not being the best cheap striker in the game. Reason being, other than matchday 13 when they play Ipswich, the projected goals for Nottingham Forest from 14 onwards are pretty woeful. And yeah, they're a team that are really strong defensively, but again, I don't think they create all that many chances from an attacking perspective, and I think Chris Wood could see a bit of a drop-off in his returns, particularly as Awoniyi started in Game Week 12. That suggests they could share minutes as well. So yeah, I'm not all that keen on Chris Wood. I want to start him for Game Week 13. Don't get me wrong, I think Ipswich is a great fixture, not worried about that, but I'm a little bit worried about him beyond that. Alright, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. Sorry that this has gone up a little bit later than it usually does. I was at a friend's birthday party today. I got back. I'm dressed up still for it. I got back and then I decided to record the video before I went to bed. So I hope you can appreciate the effort I went to there. My friends, by the way, at the party, they asked me to say something on the video. I'm just going to pull it out because it was something they asked me to say. Apparently I've got to say, Harry, Jack, and Dom were right. So there you go. I don't know what they're talking about, but yeah, that's what I was told to say on the video. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. Let me know in the comments, if there's anything you agree or disagree with there, any players I didn't necessarily cover. I'll be interested to hear it. Leave a like rating if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Goal to Goal channel if you want to see more content from me. It should be just there on your screen. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.